These are all my favorite what-ifs of JJK since it ended, so grab a snack and let's get into the video. What if Yuji Itadori had Gojo's abilities? This would completely change the start of Jujutsu Kaisen. But the biggest thing to understand first is that Yuji wouldn't be at full power yet. Even if he had the Six Eyes and the Limitless technique, that doesn't instantly make him as strong as Gojo. Back in the Hidden Inventory arc, when Gojo was younger, he already had those abilities, but he didn't fully understand them yet. It wasn't until Toji pushed him into a near-death situation that Gojo awakened his full potential, learning reverse curse technique and eventually mastering abilities like his domain expansion. So in this timeline, Yuji is more like young Gojo. He has the talent and the broken technique, but he doesn't fully understand how to use it yet. So the story still begins with Yuji living his normal life until Megumi shows up looking for Sukuna's finger. When the curse situation happens at the school and Yuji jumps in to help, this is where things start changing. Yuji still eats the finger to save everyone, but during the chaos, some curse attacks slow down before they hit him. Yuji doesn't realize it yet, but that's Limitless activating instinctively. After that, Gojo arrives and the rooftop scene plays out like normal, except Gojo quickly notices something huge. Yuji isn't just Sukuna's vessel, he also has the Six Eyes and Limitless. This is exactly why Gojo becomes so interested in him. For the first time, Gojo has a student who can actually understand and learn his technique. But there's another reason too. Since Yuji is Sukuna's vessel, Gojo already knows Yuji could eventually inherit Sukuna's techniques as well. That means Yuji could end up with Limitless, the Six Eyes, and Sukuna's abilities in the same body. From Gojo's perspective, that kind of potential is insane. Gojo even realizes that if Yuji grows properly, he could eventually rival him or maybe even surpass him someday. Because of that, Gojo decides he's going to personally train Yuji. After that, Yuji goes to Jujutsu High and meets Nobara. Gojo immediately throws the two of them into their first mission together while Megumi watches. They're sent to deal with a curse inside an abandoned building. This mission mostly plays out the same way, but one big thing stands out. During the fight, some of the curse attacks slow down when they get close to Yuji. Yuji can't control Limitless yet, but it still activates sometimes and protects him. Nobara notices Yuji surviving hits that normally would have been dangerous, and Megumi realizes Yuji's ability is actually starting to show up during real combat. The mission still ends successfully, and Gojo sees even more proof that Yuji's potential is real. But the real test is coming next, because after this mission, the next major event is the Detention Center mission where Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara will run into a special grade curse. And that's where things are going to start changing a lot more compared to the original story. So now we move into the Detention Center mission, which is the next major arc after their first mission. Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara are sent to a juvenile detention center where several people have gone missing. Right away, the situation is worse than expected. The cursed energy around the building is extremely strong, which already tells Megumi that this mission might be above their level. When they enter the building, the inside immediately starts changing. The environment shifts because of the curse's territory, and the three of them quickly realize they're dealing with something way stronger than a normal curse. Nobara still stays involved in the mission, but once Megumi senses the special grade curse deeper inside, he makes the same decision as in the original story. Nobara focuses on clearing weaker curses and protecting the area, while Yuji and Megumi move deeper inside to deal with the main threat. Eventually, the special grade curse appears. In the original story, this is where Yuji gets overwhelmed almost immediately, and things spiral into Sukuna taking control and ripping Yuji's heart out. But in this timeline, the fight plays out differently because of Limitless. When the curse attacks Yuji, it strikes slow down before they fully reach him. Yuji still doesn't understand how to use Limitless properly yet, but the space around him keeps stopping the curse from landing clean hits. So the fight lasts longer than it originally did. Yuji keeps fighting using his physical strength while Limitless protects him from some of the curse's attacks. Megumi notices this right away and realizes Yuji is surviving a fight that normally should have killed him already. But Yuji still can't properly attack with Limitless yet, so he can't finish the curse quickly. Eventually, the situation gets worse, and Sukuna senses that Yuji is in danger. Sukuna briefly takes control of Yuji's body, just like in the original timeline. The difference is what Sukuna decides to do next. Sukuna immediately notices that this body has Limitless and the Six Eyes. Instead of playing around and destroying Yuji's heart like he did before, Sukuna becomes way more interested in this vessel. A body with Limitless and the Six Eyes is far too valuable to waste. Sukuna quickly kills the special grade curse just to see how powerful this body might become later. After that, Yuji regains control of his body again. Because of this change, Yuji never dies during this arc. That means Megumi never has to fight Sukuna the way he did in the original timeline, and the whole heart removal moment never happens. The mission ends with Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara surviving the detention center. This ends up being the biggest change in the arc. Yuji proves he can already survive a fight with a special grade curse while barely understanding Limitless, and both Sukuna and Gojo realize that Yuji's potential might be even higher than they originally thought. And because Yuji never never dies here, the story moves forward without that temporary death period, which is going to change some of the upcoming events later on. Because Yuji survives the detention center arc, the higher-ups already know he's alive. Gojo already suspects they're going to target Yuji even more now, since he's Sukuna's vessel. Because of that, Gojo decides the best thing he can do is make Yuji stronger as fast as possible so Yuji can handle things on his own if the higher-ups ever try something. So Gojo starts personally training Yuji and teaches him how to use blue and red. Yuji still can't use everything perfectly yet, but learning these techniques puts him around the level of a pre-awakened Gojo. Now we have the next arc. This is the Visa's Mahito arc. Strange deaths start happening around the city, and the victims all show signs of their bodies being distorted by cursed energy. Yuji gets sent with Nanami to investigate what's going on. During the investigation, they eventually run into Mahito, the curse responsible for everything. When the fight starts, Mahito quickly realizes something is different about Yuji. Mahito tries to attack him, but the moment his hand gets close, the space around Yuji slows the attack down. Because Yuji now understands how to keep Infinity active thanks to Gojo's training, Mahito can't fight him the way he normally would. That's a huge problem for Mahito because his idol transfiguration requires physical contact. This immediately changes how the fight plays out. Mahito tries several times to land a hit, but every time he gets close, the space around Yuji stops him. Nanami also notices this and realizes Yuji is basically the worst possible opponent for Mahito's technique. Yuji starts fighting back, using his normal strength combined with blue, pulling Mahito toward him or crushing space around him during attacks. Mahito still has his shape-shifting body though, so even when Yuji lands hits, it's hard to completely damage him. Nanami joins the fight, and the two of them start overwhelming Mahito together. At this point, Mahito realizes something important. If Yuji can keep Infinity active, Mahito can't touch him at all, which means his strongest ability is basically useless. That makes the fight extremely dangerous for Mahito, but Mahito is still clever. Instead of continuing the fight directly, he creates an opening and escapes before Yuji and Nanami can finish him. Mahito retreats because he realizes fighting Yuji right now is too risky, especially with Nanami there as well. The Junpei part of the arc still happens during this storyline. Mahito still manipulates Junpei and uses him as part of his experiment. Yuji still meets Junpei and tries to connect with him. But when Mahito eventually transforms Junpei, Yuji is furious and tries to stop him. Mahito still escapes at the end of the arc though. Even with Yuji being stronger, Mahito survives by retreating before the fight fully finishes. Now we have the next arc, the Kyoto Goodwill event arc. Even though Yuji survived the detention center arc, the higher-ups still want him dead. It doesn't matter to them if he survived or not, because Yuji is still Sukuna's vessel. Because of that, the Kyoto students are still secretly ordered to eliminate Yuji if the chance appears during the event. The difference this time is that everyone already knows Yuji has the Six Eyes and Limitless. That completely changes how the Tokyo students see him. Maki is the first one to really point it out, saying that if Yuji actually has Gojo's abilities, then he might end up becoming the next Gojo someday. Panda mostly jokes about it, but he also understands Yuji is now their strongest fighter. Megumi doesn't talk about it much, but he already knows Yuji's potential after seeing him fight before. Nobara mostly just treats Yuji the same as always and doesn't really care about all the hype around him. Because of that, the Tokyo team understands Yuji is basically their strongest piece during the event. When the Kyoto students arrive, the tension is still there. They still plan to follow the higher-ups order if the opportunity appears. When the event begins and both teams enter the forest, the battles start spreading out across the area. This is when Todo shows up. Instead of waiting or testing things slowly, Todo immediately rushes Yuji and throws a punch right at him. But the moment his fist gets close, it slows down and stops before reaching Yuji because of Infinity. Yuji blocks it easily, and the two of them start throwing hands for a bit. Todo keeps attacking while Yuji defends using Infinity and throws some attacks back. Then, just like in the original timeline, Todo suddenly stops mid-fight and asks Yuji his type of woman. Yuji answers the same way he always does, and Todo instantly declares that Yuji is his brother. From that point on, they stop trying to beat each other and instead start training and fighting together like in the original story. The rest of the fights around the forest keep going. Megumi fights the Kyoto students and shows more of the Ten Shadows technique. Maki and Panda are fighting their own battles across the forest as well. Eventually, the entire event gets interrupted when Hanami appears. Once Hanami enters the battlefield, the competition basically ends and it becomes a real fight. Yuji and Todo still team up against Hanami just like in the original timeline, but the fight changes a bit because Yuji now has Infinity and knows how to use blue. Hanami's attacks struggle to reach Yuji because of Infinity slowing them down before they connect. Todo supports Yuji using Boogie Woogie, constantly swapping their positions to create openings so Yuji can land stronger hits. Even with that advantage, Hanami is still extremely durable, so the fight becomes chaotic as more students get involved, including Megumi and Maki at different points. Eventually, the situation escalates enough that Gojo steps in like he did in the original story. Once Gojo arrives, the cursed spirits realize they can't win that fight and retreat. By the end of the Kyoto Goodwill event arc, everyone watching understands something important. Yuji Itadori isn't just Sukuna's vessel anymore, he's someone who could realistically grow into the next Gojo. Before we get into the next arc, something important happens after the Kyoto Goodwill event. After the event, Yuji and Gojo continue training together. This time, Yuji actually goes beyond the level of a pre-awakened Gojo. Yuji learns reverse curse technique and is able to heal himself during fights, and Gojo also teaches him how to properly combine blue and red so he can use hollow purple. Normally, Gojo only unlocked these things after his near-death experience against Toji, but Yuji doesn't have to go through that because Gojo can directly explain the technique to him. Since their abilities are almost identical, Yuji can understand the mechanics much faster than Gojo originally did. Because of that, Yuji becomes extremely dangerous very quickly. At this point, Yuji now has reverse curse technique, blue, red, and hollow purple. The only thing he still hasn't used yet is a domain expansion. It's still unknown what Yuji's domain would be, since it could turn into Sukuna's domain, Infinite Void, or even some kind of combination of the two. That part of his power hasn't appeared yet. Now we have the next arc, the Death Painting arc. Strange cursed objects connected to the Death Painting wombs start appearing, and Yuji is sent on a mission with Nobara to investigate. Megumi is also involved in the mission at the beginning. Eventually, the mission leads them to the Death Painting brothers Eso and Kachizu. When the fight begins, the brothers quickly realize Yuji isn't a normal sorcerer. Their attacks try to reach him, but Infinity slows them down before they can fully hit him. Yuji doesn't even need to rely on it the entire time though, because his offense is way stronger now too. Yuji starts using blue to pull the brothers off balance and control the space around the battlefield. Iso and Kachizu still try to overwhelm them using their decay techniques. Nobara still plays a big role in this fight as well, because her resonance technique works extremely well against the Death Painting brothers. She's able to link the damage between them, weakening both at the same time. The fight escalates when the brothers start using their stronger attacks. Yuji begins taking the fight more seriously and uses red during one of his counter attacks to blast Kachizu back. This immediately shows the difference in power compared to the original timeline. As the fight reaches its peak, Nobara lands another resonance that damages both brothers simultaneously. With them weakened, Yuji finishes the fight by combining blue and red to fire a hollow purple, completely overwhelming the brothers and ending the fight much faster than it originally happened. By the end of the Death Painting arc, Yuji has fully proven just how much stronger he has become. With Limitless, the Six Eyes, Reverse Curse Technique, and Hollow Purple, Yuji is already approaching the level of the strongest sorcerers in the series. Now we've reached the next arc, which is one of the biggest arcs in JJK, the Shibuya arc. This arc changes a lot in this timeline because Yuji is way stronger than he was in the original story. At this point, Yuji already has the Six Eyes and Limitless. He can use blue and red, he has Reverse Curse Technique to heal himself, and he can even use Hollow Purple if the fight gets serious. On top of that, he still has his insane physical strength and hand-to-hand combat ability. Gojo still gets sealed. After Gojo is sealed, the rest of the Shibuya incident spreads into multiple battles across the city. One of the early fights is when Yuji runs into the transfigured humans Mahito created. In the original timeline, Yuji struggles with them for a while, but here he clears them much faster. Infinity keeps them from reaching him easily, and Yuji cuts through them quickly while moving deeper into Shibuya. Eventually, Yuji runs into Choso. In the original timeline, Choso overwhelms Yuji and nearly kills him, but here the fight goes very differently. Choso fires attacks like Piercing Blood and Supernova, but Infinity slows them down before they can reach Yuji. Yuji closes the distance and starts fighting Choso in close combat. Using blue to control the spacing of the fight, Yuji keeps pulling Choso off balance. Choso quickly realizes landing a clean hit on Yuji is extremely difficult. The fight becomes intense for a while, but Yuji eventually overwhelms Choso and defeats him instead of losing like in the original timeline. After defeating Choso, Yuji moves deeper into the battle across Shibuya. Around this time, another major fight is happening against Dagon. Nanami, Maki, and Naobito are all already trapped inside Dagon's domain expansion. In the original timeline, they are struggling heavily until Toji appears. In this version, Yuji arrives earlier and enters the domain as well. Inside the domain, Yuji immediately becomes a major factor in the fight. Dagon's Shikigami attacks constantly flood the area, but Infinity protects Yuji from many of the hits while he moves through the domain. Yuji uses blue to disrupt Dagon's positioning and create openings for Nanami, Maki, and now Bito to attack. Even with Yuji helping, Dagon is still extremely dangerous because of his domain. The fight becomes chaotic until Toji eventually appears, just like in the original timeline. Toji overwhelms Dagon with pure physical ability and finishes the fight. Yuji witnessing Toji's strength also adds another insane fighter to the battlefield for a short time. After Dagon is defeated, the battles across Shibuya continue. Yuji eventually runs into Mahito again. Mahito still wants revenge after their earlier encounters, but this time the matchup is far worse for him. Mahito needs physical contact for idol transfiguration, and Infinity makes that extremely difficult. Yuji keeps pressure on Mahito using his hand-to-hand combat while controlling the battlefield with blue. Mahito tries to adapt and escape during the chaos of the battle. The Shibuya incident continues with multiple fights happening across the city, but the biggest difference in this timeline is that Yuji never suffers the crushing defeat he originally had. Because Yuji stays in control throughout the arc, Sukuna never gets released and never goes on his massive rampage through Shibuya. Instead, Yuji becomes one of the central fighters, helping the sorcerers survive the Shibuya incident while Gojo remains sealed.
What if Gojo was in the Heian era, Sukuna's era? So, you guys know one of the biggest fights in JJK. Honestly, one of the biggest fights in all of anime history is Gojo versus Sukuna. It hasn't even been fully animated yet, but it's already legendary. Personally, a lot of people are probably gonna get mad at my opinion here, but I think Gojo would have won if Sukuna didn't have Mahoraga. But this is a what if, so don't take it too seriously. Let's get right into it. Now, let's say Gojo was a kid during Sukuna's time. This whole scenario depends on him unlocking reverse cursed energy and reaching his true potential. If you watched season 2, you know Gojo wasn't at full power yet. He had to experience a near-death situation just to learn reverse curse technique, Hollow Purple, and most of his main abilities. In this timeline, Sukuna probably wouldn't kill him right away. Sukuna enjoyed creating strong opponents to fight, and Kenjaku likely wasn't hunting Six Eyes users yet, so Gojo would have been safe for a while. The real question is how Gojo would unlock his full power. The Heian era was the strongest era of Jujutsu sorcery. Sukuna himself said it. There were countless powerful sorcerers back then, so Gojo could have been pushed to his limits by one of them, forcing a near-death awakening that helped him master his reverse curse technique and main abilities. Someone on Toji Fushiguro's level could have brought him to the brink, unlocking his full potential. The only thing missing would be his best friend, because before his awakening, base Gojo was only around Geto's level, but after his near-death experience, he became a completely different monster. So now we've got a fully awakened Gojo in the Heian era. He starts fighting the strongest sorcerers of the time, but none can truly match him, because, you know, he's the strongest. By now, he's gained way more fighting experience than he ever had in his original timeline. In modern Jujutsu Kaisen, not even the strongest special grades compare. Gojo was already the pinnacle of strength, and now, imagine that same level of power existing alongside Sukuna in the peak era of Jujutsu. It's gonna be insane. But I don't think Gojo would rush straight into fighting Sukuna. Yeah, he's cocky and confident, but for this what if, let's say we wait until Gojo's older and fully knowledgeable about cursed energy and all his abilities before that inevitable clash. Now, I just want to tell you guys, this is all completely hypothetical. We really don't know much about the Heian era, only that it was the pinnacle of Jujutsu sorcery. So just bear with me, because this is a hard what if when there isn't much official information to go off of. That said, I think Gojo would actually be way stronger in this era. One thing we do know about the Heian era, if you piece a few things together, is how domain expansions worked. If you look at Sukuna's domain, it's completely different from Gojo's. Sukuna's is an open domain, while Gojo's is a closed domain. In the original series, Gojo explained that the only way to break a domain expansion is by hitting it from the outside, since that's its weakest point. But because Sukuna's domain is open, he can attack freely and even damage Gojo's domain from the outside. That's a huge advantage. Now, if you notice, both Sukuna and Kenjaku, back in the Heian era, used open domains. So I think Gojo would adapt and learn an open domain too, since he's living in the same era and constantly evolving his abilities to survive. Before we get into Gojo versus Sukuna, let's keep in mind that Gojo would already know most of the tricks Sukuna knows. Since he lives in the same time period, he'd have the same level of knowledge about cursed energy and advanced techniques, just like the open domain I mentioned earlier. So before we actually compare them, let's go over both of their abilities, starting with Gojo Satoru, refined technique and the limitless power of the Six Eyes, and Limitless Cursed Technique. His inherited Limitless gives him control over space at an atomic level, letting him manipulate distance, motion, and infinity itself. The most basic application, Infinity, creates an invisible barrier that slows attacks infinitely before they reach him, making it almost impossible to touch him. He can use Cursed Technique Lapse. Blue to create a vacuum that attracts matter. Cursed Technique Reversal. Red to repel with overwhelming force, and the combination of both, Hollow Purple, to erase anything it touches from existence. Gojo's 6 eyes grants him almost godlike perception and cursed energy efficiency. He can process massive amounts of information, see cursed energy in perfect detail, and use his abilities with virtually zero waste. His domain expansion, Unlimited Void, traps opponents inside an infinite space filled with endless information, overloading their senses and rendering them immobile. Altogether, Gojo's intellect, precision, and raw power make him not only the strongest sorcerer of his era, but one of the most broken characters in modern anime. Now that we've gone over Gojo, let's move on to Sukuna's Heian era abilities. His abilities were terrifying, combining raw cursed energy output, deadly precision, and absolute mastery of technique. His innate technique, Dismantle and Cleave, are slashing attacks made purely from cursed energy. Dismantle is a general purpose slash that cuts through anything, while Cleave automatically adjusts its power based on the target's durability, slicing through both humans and cursed spirits with surgical accuracy. Sukuna's domain, Expansion, Malevolent Shrine, doesn't create a closed barrier like most domains. Instead, it manifests directly into the real world, covering a massive radius, around 200 meters, where anything within range is continuously shredded by countless cursed slashes. He's also a master of Reverse Cursed Technique, allowing him to heal himself instantly and fight in prolonged battles without exhaustion. Ancient accounts even suggest he possessed other techniques related to fire, since we've seen him use his rare Fire Arrow ability, something almost no other sorcerer can replicate. Altogether, Sukuna in the Heian era wasn't just strong, he was a godlike force of nature, blending unmatched regeneration, precision, and destructive power that defined the golden age of Jujutsu. Now, let's get into Gojo versus Sukuna. So now Gojo has an open domain, which means Sukuna can't hit him from the outside or break through it anymore. Both of their domains are basically equal at this point, canceling each other out. With that, Sukuna can't even get close to Gojo because of Infinity, so it just turns into Gojo straight up beating him down. Without Mahoraga, Sukuna has no real way to counter Infinity, so Gojo completely dominates the fight. That's the Heian era for you. Pure chaos, but Gojo runs it. Of course, this whole thing is imaginary. It's a what-if scenario, so we don't know exactly how Gojo would fight using an open domain. But if Sukuna couldn't counteract Infinity or overpower Gojo's domain, then he wouldn't even land any serious hits. In their original fight, Gojo already had some cuts and bruises, but nothing fatal. Without Mahoraga or a stronger domain, Sukuna just wouldn't stand a chance. Gojo would take the win easily. Anyway, I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate for this one, but
what if Suguru Geto never turned evil? In the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, Satoru Gojo and Suguru Geto were known as the strongest duo, but one tragic event shattered their bond and created the dark world we know. The pressure of protecting non-sorcerers, the death of Riko Amanai, and the endless disgusting cycle of swallowing curses broke Suguru Geto. It all starts right after the Hidden Inventory arc. A broken Suguru Geto is at a turning point, having lost all faith in the non-sorcerers, the monkeys, and he promised to protect. In the main story, this is where his downfall begins, leading him to kill an entire village and leave Jujutsu High. But here, something is different. Satoru Gojo has just become incredibly powerful, mastering reverse curse technique and hollow purple. He isn't the same arrogant kid from the start of the mission. After losing to Toji Fushiguro, he understands what it feels like to fail. He sees the darkness about to consume his one and only best friend. Instead of a quick, uncaring talk, Gojo faces Geto's pain directly. He reminds him that being the strongest doesn't mean they have to do everything alone. He offers a real partnership, a way to share the weight. In this timeline, Geto doesn't push him away. He leans on Gojo. He admits his growing hatred and his feeling that nothing matters, and Gojo, for once, actually listens. He doesn't have a perfect answer, but he gives Geto the one thing he needed, to know he wasn't alone. Geto decides not to give up on their dream. He turns away from the path of killing all non-sorcerers, and the strongest duo stays together. Their bond is now built on shared pain and support, not just strength. This single choice doesn't just save Geto, it completely ruins the master plan of the story's real villain, Kenjaku, who needed Geto's body for his ancient plan. With Geto staying, he and Gojo become teachers at Tokyo Jujutsu high, and the school has never had teachers like them. Their different ways of thinking, which once caused fights, now make them amazing mentors. Gojo is all about raw power, pushing students to break their own limits, while Geto becomes their guide for what's right and wrong. He teaches them the why behind their battles, showing them how to protect others without falling into the same anger that almost destroyed it. When Yuji Itadori swallows Sukuna's finger, he isn't just thrown into Gojo's crazy training. Geto is there too, and he's the only one who can truly understand what Yuji is going through. After years of swallowing and controlling curses, he would train Yuji to manage the evil spirit inside him, building a stronger mind and stopping the heavy self-doubt Yuji feels in the original story. And for Megumi Fushiguro, the son of the man who almost killed them, their teaching changes everything. Gojo would push him to finally release the full power of the Ten Shadows technique. At the same time, Geto, an expert at controlling many spirits, could give him tips on how to use his Shikigami as a team. He might even explain how a move like Maximum Uzumaki hints at how to unlock his own domain expansion. Students like Maki Zenin, who was looked down on for her lack of cursed energy, would find a huge supporter in Geto. He would support her physical strength and fight against the strict old rules of the Zenin clan. The entire student body becomes tougher and more united, led by two living legends who perfectly cover each other's weaknesses. With Gojo and Geto fighting as a team, the early threats that define the start of the series are taken care of easily. The special grade curse at the detention center, which led to Yuji's first death, that mission would have gone very differently. Gojo and Geto, sharing information and duties, never would have let first years walk into that danger alone. The attack by Hanami and the disaster curses at the Kyoto Goodwill event, that's no longer a desperate fight for the students to survive. It's a perfect lesson from the strongest. Imagine Hanami trying to open its domain only to be instantly trapped by Gojo's infinite void. At the same time, Geto could release his own army of thousands of curses, completely crushing the attackers. Todu's Boogie Woogie would be a fun trick, not a desperate last move. The combined power of Gojo's reality-bending abilities and Geto's endless curse army would have destroyed the disaster curses before they knew what hit them. The fight with Mahito, the curse born from human hate, would be especially great. While Gojo's infinity makes him untouchable, Mahito's idol transfiguration is deadly to everyone else, including Nanami. In our timeline, Geto would be right there with Yuji and Nanami. His curse manipulation is the perfect counter. He could use Maximum Uzumaki to focus the power of all his curses into one huge blast, punching right through Mahito's soul-based defense and destroying him long before he could cause so much pain and suffering. The Shibuya incident is the biggest disaster in Jujutsu Kaisen, a trap carefully set by Kenjaku with one main goal, sealing Satoru Gojo in the prison realm. But in our timeline, that plan is impossible from the start. The whole plan relies on Kenjaku having Suguru Geto's body and his cursed spirit manipulation. Without Geto's fall and death, Kenjaku never gets the tool he needs. He's still an ancient, powerful sorcerer, but he doesn't have the one thing required to start his master plan, and those disaster curses like Jogo and Mahito, they would have already been defeated in earlier fights with the Gojo Geto duo. So what happens on October 31st in Shibuya? Nothing, or if Kenjaku tries a weak plan B, it's a joke. Gojo wouldn't be tricked into a trap, there would be no 0.2 second domain expansion, no changed humans creating chaos, and no reason for the sorcerers to fight a hopeless battle across the city. The prison realm would stay locked away, just another forgotten cursed object. Most importantly, the deaths and injuries from Shibuya never happen in this timeline. Kento Nanami isn't burned to death by Jogo. Nobara Kugisaki isn't badly hurt by Mahito. Naobito Zenin survives. The city isn't torn apart by Sukuna's destructive attack after Yuji is forced to eat fingers, something Geto would have worked hard to prevent. The Shibuya arc, a story defined by loss and pain, becomes a complete non-event, proving just how important Geto's fall was for the enemy to win. The whole point of the Shibuya incident was to start Kenjaku's final plan, the culling game. This death game across the country was made to gather enough cursed energy to mix all of Japan's people with Master Tengen. But again, without Geto's body, Kenjaku can't activate the cursed techniques from far away that he planted on people like Tsumiki Fushiguro. He just doesn't have the power that came with using Geto's body. So what does that mean for the culling game? It just doesn't happen. Instead, the sorcerers, led by a united Gojo and Geto, would finally go on the attack. With their combined power, Gojo's influence, and Geto's ability to gather information with his curses, they would hunt down the remaining threats. Kenjaku would be a top target, but he'd be just another powerful enemy, not the main villain pulling all the strings. And Yuji Itadori is never sentenced to death. In the main story, the order to execute him is active again after Sukuna's attack in Shibuya. Here, with both Gojo and Geto defending him, the old-fashioned Jujutsu leaders would have no power to stop them. Yuji would get to continue his training, free from the fear fear of execution and the guilt over what Sukuna did. The whole dark, hopeless feeling of the arcs after Shibuya is replaced with strength and order. What if Yuji had awakened in Shibuya? The Yuji Itadori we know now is not a mythical being that emerged one random day. He went through absolute hell in Shibuya, and all those big losses and fights shaped him into who he is today. Shibuya is where Yuji Itadori breaks. In all possible ways, the civilian massacre fractured him as a person. Mahito and his foul executions shattered all the passion in life this boy had. The psychological torture dismantled him piece by piece, and yet despite all of this, Yuji does not awaken in Shibuya. His true power doesn't emerge until Shinjuku, long after he's accepted his role, his guilt, and his lack of heroism. Which brings us to the hypothetical question, what if Yuji awakened too early? What if his domain, his ultimate self-expression, manifested during Shibuya instead of Shinjuku? This isn't a power scaling question, but a thematic one. You see, in Jujutsu Kaisen, awakening isn't about strength, it's about self-definition. Before we dive deeper into the hypothesis, we need to understand something important. In JJK, an awakening is not a random emotional burst or an insane power-up. It's not a limit break moment either, where a character has had enough and decides the world ends today. In Peak Kaisen, an awakening is a very natural, psychological, and human response to the broken world around. In simple words, awakening happens when a character's sense of self stabilizes. Let's simplify it more with some examples. Gojo Satoru, the goat, awakens when he completely understands infinity and himself. Mahito's evolution comes around when he accepts the nature of his evil, cursed soul. Maki, the beast woman, awakens when the other part of her, Mai, leaves forever and she sheds the identity imposed on her. Sukuna, the king of courses, remains awake throughout the show because he simply has never doubted who he is. And a domain expansion is the purest manifestation of this. A sorcerer's domain is, in other words, a reflection of them. It screams, this is who I am, and this is how the world works when I am absolute. Which leads us to the problem, Yuji being incomplete during Shibuya and his hypothetical awakening being an absolute hazard for him and everyone else. Shibuya Yuji is broken. He is a shattered child bearing the burden of a genocide. He believes every death around him is his fault, and his body to him is just a vessel for Sukuna. Yuji during Shibuya defines himself entirely by responsibility and has no personal desire beyond saving people around him. Consequently, he rejects himself and stops believing in the intrinsic value of his life or the mission granted to him by his grandfather. He keeps reaching his breaking point and almost gives up, but then Todo comes around. His uplifting speech gathers all the scattered pieces of Yuji's mind, and the dude helps him stand back up. And if Yuji did have an awakening in Shibuya, Todo's brotherly speech would have been one of the triggers. Shinjuku Yuji is more lethal and powerful than Ryuman Sukuna, and he ultimately becomes a super sorcerer, surpassing Satoru Gojo. Now, we must remember that Yuji has always been an exceptional fighter before he even learned to use cursed energy. He had enough stamina to grab cars and beat the hell out of curses during the practically easy fights in Season 1. During the Shibuya arc, despite the trauma and suicidal tendencies, Yuji did not give up. His mental stamina to deal with literal hell has always been impressive. He has died, come back alive, fought, lost so many people throughout his journey, but never gave up. His evolution is impressive and shows how well written Yuji's character is. Shinjuku arc is when his evolution blooms. Kanjaku reveals that Yuji is not an ordinary being. He is a modified human and a walking curse tool made of flesh. Additionally, Yuji has complete mastery over souls, which comes from being home to two souls, his own and Sukuna's, inside his own one body. Kanjaku's modifications and repeated combats with Mahito did play a core role in amplifying his dismantle technique as well, so he has the ability to directly impact the souls and not just bodies of his opponents. The dude also consumed the remaining death paintings later on and gained the limited blood manipulation technique, which is not identical to Choso's. Yuji also acquires the reversed curse technique by swapping bodies with Yuta and developing muscle memory for all the cool stuff Yuta's body can do. The dude also becomes a Black Flash specialist and learns simple domain expansion during his training with Kusakabe and Uiyuni before Shinjuku. And since we know the domains of Jujutsu sorcerers are a reflection of them, it is no wonder that Yuji's reflects warmth, kindness, and emotional safety, but it's also lethal as it features the sure-hit effects of soul boundary dismantle. Remember when Yuji takes a walk with Sukuna in his domain to give the curse a chance at repentance? This domain was before Shinjuku. The simple domain expansion was something he learned during his training with Kusakabe, and this barrier helped him shield himself from Sukuna's slashes for 99 seconds. So yeah, Yuji came a long way and was unbeatable in Shinjuku. To put it simply, the Shinjuku Yuji is unbreakable, with unbelievable physical and mental stamina, and an excellent mastery over jujutsu techniques. One of the main triggers of the Shibuya awakening would be Mahito. All hell broke loose for Yuji because of that underdeveloped child curse. Watching Mahito execute Nanami and Nobara was his breaking point, and could have potentially led to Yuji's evolution and ultimately given birth to his awakening. Mahito was also the curse that unlocked Itadori's insane power control in Shibuya. Yuji already knew Black Flash, but his execution was imperfect before. Defeating Mahito with an unshakable purpose insanely improved his power to the point Mahito begged for his life. The actual moment when Yuji realizes he is a cog of a bigger machine and not a savior. Another trigger could have been his fights against Choso and Awasaka, where he was absolutely losing when he needed to win. In simple words, the whole Shibuya incident, including the mass murder of civilians by Sukuna, could have triggered Yuji's awakening. Todo's empowering speech and brotherhood would have been the main driving force, if anything, behind Yuji's great evolution. His awakening. What if we change the scenario completely and put an awakened Yuji, with all the abilities he has in Shinjuku in Shibuya? This would be fun, but the story would be cut short. Let's put things into perspective and see how Yuji would have fought with his current abilities in Shibuya. Yuji versus the Grasshopper, this would be a piece of cake for him. One slash is all it would take to beat that Grasshopper. This shouldn't even be on the list, to be honest. Yuji versus Choso. The fight against Choso was very tough for the young and weaker Yuji, but things will be different with the current Yuji in this situation. Now, there are two possibilities that can happen here. Number one, Yuji easily overpowers Choso and wins. Number two, Yuji, with his knowledge from the future, turns Choso into an ally. Yuji, as the strongest, would easily have the upper hand during this fight. The limited blood manipulation technique, along with reversed curse technique, will help Yuji end the fight quickly. Choso's piercing blood wouldn't be very lethal for the guy, and he would heal internal bleeding pretty quickly too. He will have the stamina and the sharper dismantle slashes to literally end Choso. But I'm pretty sure the Yuji from the future will simply unveil his identity to Choso and turn him into an overprotective, emotional older brother and an ally. Oni-chan Choso is irreplaceable from the story no matter what the scenario. This would change the events a bit, and Choso will join the Jujutsu sorcerers in fights. Yuji versus Awasaka would also be easy to take down too. Yuji's current techniques require no explanation anymore, I'm sure, and the long while it took Yuji to handle this cursed spirit will be cut short. Another easy win, Yuji versus Mahito. Mahito is very important to the plot. He is the reason why the culling games even happen. The Black Flash amateur Yuji lands on him were hella impressive already, but with his sharpened skills from Shinjuku era, Yuji will literally kill Mahito before he makes it to Kenjaku's side. The current Yuji is a master of soul boundary dismantle, a technique that allows a sorcerer to destabilize the soul. His punches laced with immense cursed energy and physical power will crush Mahito, and it would be hella easy to exercise him. Consequently, Kenjaku will lose access to Mahito and the culling games arc wouldn't happen. However, Yuji would still not be able to unseal Gojo, as the conditions to open the prison realm are still unmet. So does this timeline look ideal? Absolutely not. You see, it just wouldn't do any favors for Yuji to awaken in Shibuya. Even if we put the strongest form of Yuji in Shibuya, the city will still burn and Sukuna will still kill people. Besides Kenjaku losing and having to wait for another century to pull off the culling games. An awakened Yuji can defeat everyone in Shibuya except Mahoraga, of course, but there will be no philosophical direction and thrill. However, this might save a lot of friends in the end, which would be the only.
What if Jin Woo was in Jujutsu Kaisen? Now, I already did a similar one on my main channel of what if Tanjiro had the solo leveling a power system. One of my favorite videos. Go check it out right now. But we're doing what if Jin Woo was in JJK. Now, we need to figure out which version of Jin Woo we're putting in here. Because if we use one that's way too powerful, like when he was fighting the final god level enemy at the end of the series, we can't really put him in. At that point, the only one who would even have a chance is Gojo with his infinity, because he he can't get touched. And even then, I still think Jin Woo would somehow surpass that. So instead, I want to pick Jin Woo at the end of Season 2, around the Jeju Island arc. I just rewatched the entire Season 2, so I really wanted to do this anyway. At this point, he's already extremely powerful. He has Baru, he has a late-stage Drake, and he literally just defeated a massive dungeon to get the life elixir for his mom. He basically soloed an S-rank gate, so I think this works perfectly. I'm going to place him at the very beginning, when Gojo and Megumi find Yuji at the school. Jin Woo is already a natural sorcerer, but he uses cursed energy. He still has his own technique, which is shadow extraction, just adapted to cursed energy instead of mana. Everything he does is basically the same, just converted into the JJK power system. He's also around the same age as Gojo, and this actually affects Gojo a lot. Now, I want to talk about Gojo and how he would feel in this timeline. Gojo wouldn't develop that I'm the strongest complex as hard, because Geto couldn't keep up with him in the original timeline. Now, we have a trio of 3 monsters at the top. I don't think Geto being evil would be avoided though. Jin Woo is there when Toji fights Gojo, and I think Toji would lose this time, because Jin Woo has Beru and elite shadow soldiers that can actually pressure Toji. Because of that, Gojo fully unlocks reverse curse technique, but this time, he's doing it alongside Jin Woo. Both of them keep climbing higher, while Geto slowly falls behind. Like I said before, I would want to think Geto stays good, but I honestly think he still turns evil. Jin Woo and Gojo become close. They're reaching insane heights together, and Geto is stuck at the bottom, watching it happen. That resentment still builds. Because of that, everything involving Yuta still happens mostly the same. Now, at the very beginning of the story, Jin Woo doesn't actually change much. Everything still happens the same. Curses exist. Sorcerers fight them. Yuji Itadori is a normal high schooler with insane physical strength. Megumi Fushiguro comes to Yuji's school looking for one of Ryomen Sukuna's fingers. A curse attacks the school. Yuji swallows Sukuna's finger to save Megumi. Sukuna awakens. Satoru Gojo shows up and completely overwhelms Sukuna. The higher-ups want Yuji executed. Gojo makes a deal. Yuji will live, collect all 20 fingers, and die later. Yuji joins Jujutsu Ha. Yuji meets Megumi and Nobara Kugisaki. They complete their first mission together. Everything continues normal. Alright, so after Yuji and Nobara complete their first mission and pass, now we get into what the higher-ups were really trying to do to Yuji, my boy. They send Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara to the detention center. This is when the higher-ups basically tell them to go there, and if they get jumped by that special grade, Yuji is supposed to let out Sukuna to beat it. But this time, Gojo already knows the higher-ups are kind of after Yuji, so he tells Jin Woo to put a shadow on all 3 students just in case anything happens, so he can shadow exchange. Now, once Jin Woo sees that they're in real trouble, he shadow exchanges straight to Yuji. Right before Yuji is about to turn into Sukuna, Jin Woo stops him and breaks the finger barrier himself. He easily kills it and easily exorcises it. Because of that, Yuji stays alive. Megumi never has to fight Sukuna, and Yuji never has to make that binding vow with Sukuna. So this time, Satoru Gojo and Yuji never get that secret one-on-one training. Well, they still train, but it's not a secret anymore, because Megumi and Nobara already know Yuji is alive. He still does the movie training they did in the original timeline though. Now after this, we get to the Mahito arc with Junpei and everything else. But here's the thing, Jin Woo never shows up there. There's no reason for him to, because Yuji isn't in immediate danger. I know Yuji gets messed up in that fight, but he's not alone. He has a grade 1 sorcerer there, so Jin Woo doesn't need to intervene at all. Because of that, this arc stays exactly the same as the original timeline. Now we move into the Kyoto Goodwill event arc. This time, it's not really a big secret that Yuji is alive. So the event starts, and everything basically happens the same until the moment the special grade curses show up. This is where things completely change. I think Kenjaku would have a totally different plan here, because now Jin Woo and Gojo are both present at the event. And just because Gojo can't enter the barrier doesn't mean Jin Woo can't. Even if Jin Woo can't walk through it normally, he still has shadow exchange, so he could probably teleport inside without even going through the barrier. Now with that, Jin Woo is just way too strong and way too experienced. The barrier was meant to keep Gojo out. Like in the original timeline, Gojo would still try to disable the veil like he did in the original timeline to help from the outside. But because of Jin Woo's presence, everything changes. Yuji and Todo would still fight together, but they would never fight Hanami. Maki and Megumi would never get as badly injured like they did in the original timeline. This time, Jin Woo handles everything perfectly, using his shadow soldiers to jump Hanami and make sure it can't escape. This is a massive change. Another special grade curse is already dead, because Jin Woo kills it pretty easily. He's one of the strongest beings in the universe. But because of that, Yuji ends up a little weaker overall, since he never gets that big growth moment fighting alongside Todo. So then next is the death painting arc. It happens exactly the same. There's really nothing that changes. Jin Woo doesn't even show up there. So, in Shibuya, There really isn't much that can be changed at the start. The curses only want Gojo. They make it clear that if anyone else enters, they'll just start killing civilians. Because of that, Gojo goes in alone. And just like in the original timeline, he still gets sealed. Jin Woo does not stop this. He arrives at the prison realm closes. By the time Jin Woo steps into Shibuya, everything already happened. The strongest sorcerer, stronger than Sukuna, is already gone. And the curses, especially the special grades, are roaming around killing sorcerers and civilians. Now Jin Woo does his best using his shadows. Here's the thing though, to beat a special grade curse, he needs at least a really strong shadow like Igris, or top fighters like Baru or Tusk, just to at least hold them off. I know Igris and Baru could probably take one by themselves, but Tusk can at least stall one for a long time. So Jin Woo spreads out a massive amount of shadows, his shadow ants, his bears, and everything else, to protect people and escort civilians out. Honestly, it kind of gives the same vibes as what Geto did with curses, where he had a huge army. The difference is, Jin Woo has way more control, and his shadows are way more powerful. The first thing Jin Woo really does is clean up. He's clearing curses, securing areas, and transferring civilians to safety. Then Jin Woo finds Yuji Itadori, badly beaten by Choso. Jin Woo gives Yuji a potion and heals him back up, and from that point on, Yuji starts traveling with Jin Woo. Now this part isn't as flashy, because since Yuji never reaches that near-death state, Sukuna never gets released, so the curse's original plan completely falls apart. Yuji was supposed to be the key piece to force-feed Sukuna's fingers, but that doesn't work anymore. Realistically, trying to go after Yuji at this point is a death sentence, because Jin Woo is always with him. No one can capture him, and no one can kill him. Since Jin Woo is around Yuji, and Jogo arrives pretty fast in Shibuya, Jin Woo senses Dagon and everything else going on. Once Dagon's domain finally breaks, Jin Woo steps in and instantly kills Dagon. Now with Toji, Jin Woo has to go save Megumi, so he leaves elite shadows like Baru with Maki and the others. Before leaving, Jin Woo heals Maki and everyone else from the burns using potions. Then Jin Woo goes to Megumi, uses his shadows to assist him, and personally fights Toji. This time, Jin Woo kills Toji himself instead of Toji killing himself. After that, Jogo shows up and sees a massive number of shadows protecting everyone. Jogo starts tearing through them, but Baru stops him and engages him directly. Jin Woo shadow exchanges back in, boosts his strength, and starts boxing Jogo. He kills Jogo easily, similar to how Gojo did before. Because of this, the Shibuya incident isn't nearly as devastating. Mahito is still alive for a bit, but Jin Woo eventually finds him and kills him too. It's way easier in this timeline because Jin Woo has Baru, his other shadows, and Yuji helping. Since Mahito's soul needs direct damage, Yuji still plays an important role. Because of this, Todo never loses his arm. Choso becomes an ally. The casualties are massively reduced. With Jin Woo still around, the higher-ups never even talk about executing Yuji. Jin Woo takes over the role Gojo had, protecting Yuji and standing between him and the higher-ups. Since Gojo is gone, Jin Woo becomes that shield instead. Now, this is where I left off in the first video, but I'm gonna put everything together here so you guys get the full timeline. This is everything that happens after the Shibuya arc, so let's get right into it. Now, with this arc, I'm gonna keep it pretty short because honestly, I don't think much really changes or even happens at all. The whole point of this arc was the higher-ups trying to execute Yuji again, but in this timeline, that doesn't really work. Because Jin Woo is there. Jin Woo already took over Gojo's role as the one protecting Yuji, and nobody is getting past him. So even if the higher-ups try to send someone like Yuta, it just wouldn't go the same way. At most, it would probably just be a quick interaction instead of a real fight. Perfect preparation arc. Maki's arc. Now this arc, I don't really know what Jin Woo would even do here, so honestly, I think he does nothing. This is really Maki's arc, and it's very personal to her and the Zenin clan. Jin Woo doesn't really have a reason to interfere, and I don't think he would step in unless something went completely wrong. So basically, everything stays the same. Now we are going into one of the biggest arcs in the manga, the Culling Game arc. And in this timeline, it still starts the same way, because Kenjaku still begins the game and throws sorcerers into the colonies, but the whole thing goes way better for the good guys, because Jin Woo is there the whole time, and he is watching everyone with his shadows, so people are still fighting, people are still getting points, and people are still trying to make rules. But nobody is just getting left alone to die like before. Yuji still has his big moments, and still grows as a fighter, but he is not getting broken down every 5 seconds. Megumi still fights, and still gets stronger, but he never gets pushed into that point where everything falls apart for him. Yuta is still clearing strong players, and showing why he is one of the strongest, and Maki is still doing Maki things, and is still that monster on Toji's level, so all the main players still get their moments. But they are in way better shape because Jin Woo keeps helping from the side, and jumps in when something gets too bad. The biggest change in this whole arc is still Sukuna, because the binding vow never happens earlier in the story. story. And because of that, Sukuna never gets that free setup he had in canon, which means he never gets Megumi's body at all. That is the main thing that changes everything. Megumi never gets taken over. He never gets crushed from the inside. He never gets that brain damage, and he never has his whole life ruined by Sukuna. And because Megumi never gets taken over, Tsumiki never gets dragged into that horrible end either, so she lives. Megumi lives. And both of them actually get to have a future after all of this is over. Angel also lives, because Angel only gets tricked and nearly taken out because of Sukuna using Megumi's body, and that never happens here, so Angel stays alive and still helps the good guys. Because Angel is still alive, the plan to unseal Gojo still works, and Gojo gets released, just like in the original story, but this time, when he comes back, the world is not ruined. Sukuna is not running wild in Megumi's body, and Jin Woo has already been holding everything together. So now the good guys have both Gojo and Jin Woo on the field at the same time, and that is just too much for Kenjaku to deal with. Kenjaku can still move things around for a little while, but once Gojo is back and Jin Woo is already there, his plan is basically done, and sooner or later, they find him and kill him before he can do anything bigger. Kashimo is still in the culling game, but he never gets that Sukuna fight he wanted, because Sukuna never gets out like that. So Kashimo just keeps fighting strong people in the game, gets his fun, sees how strong Gojo and Jin Woo are, and pretty much has to accept that his dream fight is never happening. But the good part for him is that he lives. Higuruma also lives, because there is no last war against Sukuna, where he gets dragged into that final mess. And since the last arc never happens the same way, a lot of people make it out alive. Gojo lives, Higuruma lives, Kashimo lives, Choso lives, because he never has to throw his life away, Angel lives, Tsumiki lives, Megumi lives, a way better life. And even the world itself is just in much better shape because that last big disaster never comes. And the reason the Shinjuku Showdown arc never really happens is simple. Sukuna is still inside Yuji the whole time. He never gets a new body, he never gets to run loose, and he never gets that giant final run where he kills everyone. Instead, the problem at the end becomes what to do with Sukuna while he is still inside Yuji. And in this timeline, the answer is not to split them apart right away, because that is too risky. Instead, Yuji stays the vessel, keeps all the fingers inside him, and keeps Sukuna locked down perfectly. Not like Naruto and Kurama where they become buddies or anything like that, but more like Yuji has full control, and Sukuna is completely trapped inside him with no real way out. Gojo, Jin Woo, and Angel all help make that possible by making sure Yuji is strong enough and locked in enough that Sukuna can never take over, never jump bodies, and never break free. So at the end, Yuji stays alive, Sukuna stays trapped inside Yuji forever, Megumi gets to live with his sister, Angel stays alive, Kenjaku dies, the final arc never happens the same way, and a whole lot more people get saved. So that's what would happen. Make sure to like and subscribe, and go check out my Who's the Strongest Culling Game Player in Jujutsu Kaisen tier list, because I really like that video, and I explained everything really well in it. Also, go check out my main channel and watch What If Jin Woo Was in Demon Slayer, because that's one of my favorite videos I've made.